Hello and welcome to Talking Books. I'm Jill de Villiers. The landscape of the Free State province in South Africa stretches forever towards the horizon, with occasional koppies, dams and rivers highlighting the predominantly golden vistas. My guest today is Jennifer Friedman. She grew up in a small Free State town and she has written 2 memoirs about her life there. The back cover of the first memoir, Queen of the Free State, sets the tone for both books. The outsider on the inside, the one who watches and listens, the bearer of tales. The next book is called The Messiah's Dream Machine. Jennifer, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
So you're no longer living in the country,
No.
but you have very strong memories?
Oh yes, oh yes. I think in my mind I actually never left.
Oh. So how long have you been in Australia now?
26 years.
Wow.
But I can tell you that if I close my eyes, I can see everything in the farms. It's as if I'm there.
There's a vivid, it is so vivid. Reading the book, it is as if you are really there. You take one really there into the Free State. Tell me a little bit about this small town, Villiers.
Ah, Villiers. Villiers, it's the oldest town in the Free State, and it's really beautiful. It's got lovely architecture, and it's got a wonderful cemetery. It's really old, pepper trees. It's beautiful. And my grandfather came there with his father, my great-grandfather, really at the turn before, in late 1800s. And my great-grandfather was a smose, and then he started a little shop. And family's been there forever. And my grandfather farmed, and my uncle Leslie farmed, and my cousins are still farming on the same farms today.
Oh. And you loved living there?
Oh yeah. My parents lived in Henneman. My father was the first pharmacist on the gold fields. So I went to school in Henneman, but I spent all my holidays on the farm. My mother was only too happy to send me off.
Yeah, so you write about that quite vividly in the second book, about being sent off to boarding school in the Cape. And you tell about how on a previous occasion you were with your mother at the station with another mother seeing off a child, and your mother saying, "I will never do that to you."
Yeah.
And then came the time that she did.
She did. I don't think I ever forgave her, I mean I do now, but it was, I really believed her because she had gone to boarding school herself during the war years, and she'd hated it. But she sent me, and I hated it too.
You mentioned the cemetery. You had a relationship with the cemetery when you were a little girl, and you called yourself the Queen of the Free State because of your relationship with the cemetery. Please tell me about that.
You know, in those days it was perfectly safe. I used to walk from my grandfather's house all the way down to the cemetery, and it was very quiet. It was really beautiful. And the old graves there had beautiful headstones. There were marble angels and little lambs and doves. They were beautiful. But there were also lots of children's graves. And nobody ever came to tend to them or to look after them. And it bothered me. So I used to go down, and on the graves were these little glass, I don't know, containers, sort of was a domed glass, and inside were these beautiful arrangements of ceramic flowers and things. So I would rearrange everything, and I used to pretend. It was a wonderful place to pretend. So all the people in the cemetery became my subjects, my loyal subjects. They listened to every word I said. They never argued. It was wonderful. And I knew the names because the names were on the gravestones, you know, so headstones. It was.
So, and later on as well, you write about the cemetery. The cemetery has some evocative stories. There's this incident where an uncle of yours had passed on and is taken to to the mortuary, but it's a very, very long story.
Unfortunately.
An absolutely fascinating story and extremely well written. But can you capture a little bit of that moment for us, please?
Well, he was my great uncle, and he was my grandfather's youngest brother. He was a real tease, and he used to play pranks on people, and he had an enormous fund of really filthy jokes, and he didn't mind who he told them to. He liked to shock people. Everybody knew him, and he was a great tennis player. In fact, he played tennis until in his late 90s, just before he died. I was living in Johannesburg, and my cousin on the farm phoned me and he said, "I'm really sorry to tell you, Uncle John died." I was really surprised. I couldn't understand. Sick? No. He says, the doctor said his battery just got popped, so he died. Okay. Anyway, cut a long story short, Uncle John's wife, Auntie Frida, had phoned the farm and asked for my uncle to come and help her. My uncle was already out in the veld. So my aunt told my cousin, who was about 20 or so at the time, "You take the bakkie and you go into town and go and see what you can do to help Auntie Frida." And my cousin said to me, I didn't know what to do. I mean, here was this bereft elderly woman, and he was out of his teenage years. I mean, he was upset about it. But he went, and when he got there, he said it looked like a snowstorm. All the tissues and the cigarette butts. She was a heavy smoker. Yeah. Anyway, my uncle had finally arrived, and they decided that they would have to find something to carry Uncle John to the mortuary on. And the cemetery was not far away. In fact, it was a couple of streets away. So my uncle went to the cemetery, to the mortuary, looked around, couldn't find anything, came back, and he said to Auntie Frida, "We've got a problem. I can't find a stretcher or anything." And as he was talking to her, he was looking around, and on the stoep there were some deck chairs. You know, those old-fashioned deck chairs. So, perfect. A boer maak 'n plan. Okay. Yeah. So he said, "We'll put Uncle John on the deck chair, then we'll put him on the back of the bakkie, and we'll cover him, and we'll take him to the mortuary," which they did, and with a lot of trouble, because it was kind of difficult to lift the old man. He was small and light, but I think the rigor mortis must have kind of worn off. So they finally loaded him onto the back of the bakkie. Then they had to decide which one they were going to use, because one of them had a lot of sheep in, and it was quite a lot of scat in it, and the other one, my cousin's one, wasn't that bad, and they just sort of got rid of the paar drolletjies and pushed him in, and they drove off, and the wind was blowing really hard that day, and the soil in Philippolis area is red. So by the time they got to the cemetery, it didn't look good. It was.
So now people would have to read to find out what happens next.
Yes.
But what is also interesting is Philippolis is largely an Afrikaans town.
Oh yes.
So you speak Afrikaans.
Yeah.
And you write poetry in Afrikaans as well.
Yeah.
But now complication came in because being Jewish, the burial ritual is very different from what the standard Afrikaans Christian burial ritual is. So certain advice had to be taken, and the rabbi wasn't going to come, so things had to be arranged by the family themselves.
Exactly.
So, tell me.
Okay. So my uncle, who was a dentist in Cape Town, he was going to come down and conduct the service. And in the meantime, my uncle Leslie, who's the farmer, had phoned him, and the dentist had told him, "You've got to do this, that, and that," because the body had to be washed and prepared. And when they opened the door of the mortuary, it's a tiny, tiny little building. There's a picture of it in the book, and we'd never been allowed to go in there. I used to think it was a doll's house when I was a kid, until my mother told me, no, that's where they put the dead people, and then I didn't want to go anywhere near it. So my cousin told me he'd been inside. I couldn't wait to hear nothing. He said, "There's nothing in the cement slab, that's all." Anyway, they put him on the cement slab, and then one of them was supposed to stay with the body to basically look after, to guard him basically. But it was very cold. It was June or something like that. It was really cold. and I think they were both a little bit bung.
Nobody would be keen to spend a night in a mortuary, in a cemetery in the middle of nowhere.
No, exactly. Anyway, so they then decided they'd go back to the farm. I don't want to say more.
And I don't think you should. I don't think you should say more. So if anybody wants to know what happened then, they should read the book. You tell a lot more stories about the Free State and about living in the Free State, also about your sojourn in the boarding school. But then you go to Israel, and it was in 1977. I think.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Really a difficult time at the stage to go to Israel. How did you settle in there?
I didn't. Well, we were supposed to go for 6 months, which is neither here nor there. We'd let our house in Ilovo and kind of packed up, semi-packed up. But I thought, well, 6 months, neither here nor there. We can go and do a lot of sightseeing and that sort of thing, but not much point in settling down. But it dragged on for 2.5 years. I say dragged on, I mean it was difficult. And then my daughter was born there. But at the time there were a lot of bomb blasts, and it was not a good time to be in Israel. And the outsider, you know, it's neither fish nor flesh somehow.
So now it's Australia. And do you think there's another book coming?
Yeah, I'm in the process of about just over halfway of writing the third one.
And what is the third one about?
Well, there are more stories about South Africa, and I suppose and married life and pets and animals and things, which they're funny. And then there'll be quite a few stories about flying, because I've got an aeroplane. And we'll see.
Oh, aeroplane. So do you fly? Your childhood was a lot around sheep farming. Australia is also very well known for sheep farming. Are you doing anything in there?
No, not at all.
Oh,
I fly, you know, to the outback a lot, and it's the only place you can breathe. You know, it's lovely out there. It's beautiful. And their lamb, it's not bad. We fly out west and we go for crumbed cutlets to particular places. They're nice, but not Karoo lamb. Nothing like it.
Jennifer Friedman, thank you so much for coming in and chatting to us.
Thank you so much
about
for
your
having
memoirs.
Me. Thank you.
And the two books we spoke about are The Queen of the Free State and The Messiah's Dream Machine. And that brings us to the end of today's show. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.